All right, I think welcome everyone to our CivicSpark Capstone Poster Symposium. I think we'll just wait a few more seconds, I think, for some folks to trickle in. In the meantime, I think I'll just give a brief kind of introduction to myself and kind of our session that we have today. So my name is Sarah. I'm one of the regional coordinators for the program. And I oversee the Sacramento Sierra Nevada region of CivicSpark, a national service program with Local Government Commission. And this is our 6th CivicSpark session for the Graduation Poster Symposium series, where we're hoping to really kind of celebrate our fellows' accomplishments and demonstrate kind of the best practices of serving with local governments across California. And I think today our session is entitled Implementing and Tracking California's Climate Action Strategies. And I think we're really excited to get started. But before we begin, we do have a few kind of logistical details that we do want to kind of share. So I think if you are experiencing kind of any technical difficulties with today's calls, I think feel free to message Kaylee McCain, who's the co-facilitator today, who's kind of helping with kind of those issues. She's the regional coordinator for the Central Coast region, and you can, I think, message her directly through the chat feature and send her kind of a private message if you're having any issues. And for this poster session, our fellows will be presenting, I think, 5 to 6 minute presentations on kind of their capstone posters and any supplementary slides. Their posters will really be summarizing kind of their accomplishments from these 11 months of the AmeriCorps Fellowship. And after each of these presentations, we will open things up to a few questions from the audience. So you could either, I think, unmute yourself and ask your questions directly, or you can send them through the chat box in which it will kind of read off your questions to the presenters. In addition to that, we also have a new interactive tool that we're hoping to share with you all that will kind of visually identify kind of where the fellows are serving, which have kind of PDFs of the fellows capstone posters, and they will be available through the tool. And so I think after the symposium, if you want to kind of read a little bit more about the fellows projects and see kind of where they're located geographically, you can kind of use that tool, in which I believe Kaylee is sending or will be sending through the chat box to the link that's on our website. So definitely feel free to explore that and kind of see where all these various projects are located. And then finally, we just wanted to encourage you all as audience to really participate through this virtual event and to share kind of your encouragement and your congratulations to the fellows as they are kind of, I think, doing their presentations, or you have questions towards the end, and really kind of, I think, keep this an engaging kind of presentation. So I think without further ado, we'll get into our main show, in which we're starting off, I think, with Jianelli Morones with City of Woodland, and then from there going with Emily Severeid from City of Davis.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for attending my Capstone Poster presentation. I'm really excited to share the projects that I've been working on. So I'm going to talk about 2 of the projects that I worked on this year, and I'm going to start with the Climate Action Plan Story Map. So to first give a little bit of background, in 2017, the City of Woodland adopted the Climate Action Plan, or CAP, as a planning document that provides strategies to guide efforts in reducing greenhouse gas emissions in 6 target areas. So for this service year, I was tasked with continuing the work of last year's fellow and finalizing an interactive CAP story map as a mechanism for tracking the city's progress towards its CAP goals, and as a way of communicating this information to city staff, community members, and city council to advance the city's progress towards sustainability. So the website is a little different from a traditional dashboard, in that, in essence, we were able to put the entire climate action plan onto one interactive website. So the story map will not only be used by community members and city council to implement greenhouse gas emissions reduction strategies, but also as an example to other cities of an accessible CAP website that serves to provide progress updates towards the city's CAP goals and to outline strategies that promote community-wide greenhouse gas emissions reduction. So some of the main outcomes of this project include, first, with the help of my supervisor, I developed metrics for tracking progress towards greenhouse gas emissions reduction in all 6 target areas. The website increases transparency and awareness of city programs and services available to Woodland residents. And I utilized interactive and engaging data visualization tools to present these progress updates. So given that Esri's Story Maps was a free tool for the city to use, it would be a great option for other cities and agencies to consider using as a communication and data visualization tool. So while the program did have some design limitations, its functionality still has many benefits and can be used for a wide variety of purposes. Next slide, please. So here are just a few of the main components of the website. So the picture at the top left of the screen here is an example of the basic format of each chapter tab in the website. So this screenshot in particular is from the Energy tab. And so each tab will have this same structure, which starts with a chapter overview page, followed by some tabs that are split up according to specific strategies for reducing emissions in your home or business, and with links to additional outside resources. This picture at the top right is an example of one of the interactive maps that are embedded in the website, and one of the energy sections in particular. And this map demonstrates renewable energy generation in various businesses and institutions throughout the city. So the yellow dots here are clickable, and once you click them, they will show you that business's renewable energy generation. And then finally here, the bottom picture is an example of one of the many interactive graphs that are displayed on the website. So the same idea here applies, where that the graph is interactive, and when you click explore, you can scroll over each data point to see exactly what the city's progress in each year is. So in many of these graphs, I included a target line, which is the yellow line that you see on the bottom. And so as you can see in this instance, the city is well on its way to meeting its electricity greenhouse gas emissions reduction goal. And next slide, please. And so finally, I wanted to show another main feature of the story map, which is this progress highlights section on the very first, the main page of the website. So this section is intended to provide a very broad overview of the city's progress towards a particular CAP goal in each chapter. And when you scroll down below this section in the website, there are sections for each chapter that go into a little more detail for these progress updates and that state whether the city is on track towards these goals. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to kind of shift gears and talk a little bit about my outreach and engagement project. So a little bit of background here. In 2019, the City of Woodland established a Sustainability Advisory Committee to serve as a forum for public input and to assist City Council with climate policy formulation and program development. So I was tasked with creating an outreach and engagement guide that serves to identify Woodland's vulnerable populations, the critical needs that must be met for these populations to become resilient in the face of climate change, and to determine how the community can support outreach methods and program development that meet these needs. So like I talked about, the main goal of the guide is to focus on populations that are most vulnerable to climate change and how the committee can reach them. So some of the main sections of the guide include an overview of each vulnerable population with some of my research regarding the factors that make these populations vulnerable, how their vulnerability is exacerbated by climate change, and then I also include some sections that explore various outreach frameworks that my research suggests could be effective in Woodland. Within these frameworks, I explored various strategies for program development and policy evaluation that might be useful for the committee to use as a general guideline. So the guide will serve as a living document that the committee can refer to and make amendments to during climate program development that will support the needs of vulnerable populations. So this will allow the guide to continuously evolve to best support the community. So while the guide is tailored to community groups that exist in Woodland, the vulnerable populations research is based on social and economic factors that affect these populations all throughout California. So the guide can be used to influence other cities' outreach and engagement strategies, climate resiliency program development, and equitable policy formulation. So that is, in a nutshell, the two projects that I worked on. Thank you again to everyone for attending. Let me know if there are any questions, or in the next slide, my email is there, and go ahead and reach out to me there, and I'd be more than happy to discuss them in more detail with you. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Jianelli. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to, I think, unmute yourself and to ask your question, or you can type the questions in the chat box. Great, and I think we have a question that came in from Savannah Gill, who asks, if the story map tool is available to be viewed by the public.
As of right now, it's not live yet, but it is in its very final stages of editing, and we don't have an exact timeline, but it should be available to the public very soon. So it will be made live probably within the next 2 weeks or so.
Great. And then a question from Jonathan Pruitt, who asks, how is community engagement going while virtual?
Yeah, that's a good question. That was definitely one of the obstacles I had to overcome in the outreach and engagement research that I was doing. I did try attempting to reach out to some of these organizations, unfortunately, that were hit with the pandemic and did not have the resources or time to meet with me to discuss these populations in more detail. But they did express interest in looking at the guide, and I will pass along some of my resources and contacts to the committee that will have the opportunity to meet with these organizations in the future.
Great. And then a question from Alexandra Henninger, who asks if the engagement guide will be publicly available.
The guide will be publicly available as soon as the committee reviews it in one of their meetings. So I'm not exactly sure when that will happen. I assume it will happen at their next meeting in August. And as soon as they review that, and it will be available in the minutes, and it will be available as a public-facing document.
Perfect. Great. And then I guess, are there any additional questions that anyone wants to ask? If not, I think you can definitely reach out to Jianelli, I think through email as shown in this slide. And we'll have, I think, more information on projects in our kind of interactive online tool. And I think up next we have Emily Severeid with City of Davis.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening to our presentations today. I'm really excited to share with you about my project. My name is Emily Severeid, and I have been the CivicSpark Fellow with the City of Davis this year. My project focused on sustainability progress tracking and climate resiliency communications. A really brief background overview of what Davis's work was that led up to this project began in 2010, when the city adopted the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, or CAP for short. Then just last year in March, the City Council adopted the resolution declaring a climate emergency and proposing mobilization efforts to restore a safe climate. This resolution called for a robust CAP update and a greenhouse gas inventory update with regularly tracked metrics regarding greenhouse gas emissions reductions and community-wide sustainability in Davis. This year, the City of Davis joined other local jurisdictions to complete the regional greenhouse gas inventory in partnership with Ascent Environmental Consulting. Davis is also beginning to enter the process of updating their CAP. It should begin the update later this year. With all of these things, I got the opportunity as the CivicSpark Fellow to work with the sustainability program at the City of Davis to begin developing a sustainability progress tracking methodology, which includes metrics relating to community-wide sustainability. These metrics and the methodology will be used in the early stages of the CAP update for the community engagement purposes. Some of the metrics that I was able to develop are in the energy, transportation, and community resiliency sectors. The multicolored graph here on my slide, and I apologize for it being small, shows an example of one metric that I created. It's a visual representation of Davis's progress towards their double up on solar goal, which aims to have 4,500 residential solar systems installed in Davis by the end of 2020. This graph shows progress towards that goal and the number of megawatt hours produced and the estimated metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent avoided on an annual basis. And as of the end of April this year, we're about 90% of the way towards that goal. So it seems like it's going to be achieved, which is really exciting. And then in addition to these metrics, I've also developed a white paper with a detailed evaluative criteria framework and recommendations for the City of Davis to use in the future when developing a more in-depth progress tracking methodology. This white paper will be utilized by city staff and council commissioners also throughout the CAP update process as they're working with the consultant on developing the CAP. And then another highlight from my project this year has been an expanded internal and external communications about the city's sustainability measures. I've gotten the opportunity to work with external stakeholder groups such as Cool Davis, which is a community organization that focuses on engaging the community about sustainability in Davis. I was able to write a news article for them about city permitting practices during the COVID-19 pandemic, which focused on rooftop solar and the double up on solar goal. I've also worked extensively with staff across city departments to inform them about Davis's approach to climate action planning, develop communication tools for residents, and participate in an update of the Davis website to reflect recent sustainability and climate actions. And all of these little pictures along the right side of my slide kind of show that from top to bottom. It's a video that I created about the GHG inventory update, a screenshot of the news article that I wrote for Cool Davis, and a flyer about stormwater pollution prevention that I created for the Environmental Resources Division. And that'll conclude my presentation today. Thank you all for listening. And I'm happy to answer any questions, or my contact information is here on this slide if you want to reach out with more detailed questions.
Thank you, Emily. And I think, yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to, again, to unmute yourself if you want to ask your questions directly, or you can type them in the chat and I can read them out to Emily.
I have a question briefly.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is responsible for progress towards the solar installation goal?
Honestly, I think that Cool Davis had a big kind of part in it, because they were created in 2010 after the original cap was adopted. And so they have had a lot of time, a decade now, to engage with the community and talk about sustainability and what's it called, like sustainable energy production in Davis. And also Davis just has a super long history of having a super engaged resident base, which is really lucky for them, I think, and has helped a lot with them reaching this goal.
Great. And any other questions from folks?
Emily, I really like how you included the greenhouse gas emissions reductions on the same chart as the solar installed. Did you do that for all of your performance metrics?
I did where I could find the data. Some of the one of the like more minor challenges that I had with my project was finding the line between where the metrics that I was creating were going to go, like research-wise, and where the greenhouse gas inventory was going to be focusing on, and making sure there wasn't too much overlap there, so that the two different projects wouldn't generate the same results. And so when I could find the data available for kind of emissions, then I would include it in the metrics. Some of the things that were more difficult to measure, like community resiliency, where I talk about food access and food security in Davis, those don't have as many GHG implications, so they weren't included in those.
Great, thank you.
And then I think two questions from Jonathan Pruitt, who asks, where does Davis get the energy from, and if that's from PG&E, and then if there's been any talks about community choice energy.
Yeah, Davis is part of a community choice energy aggregate known as Valley Clean Energy. They were formed in 2018. They launched operations. And so some residents in Davis have been getting their energy from them. Otherwise it is from PG&E, I think.
Jonathan says Stockton is also looking into that. And a question from Savannah Gill, is the city of Davis utilizing energy storage or planning to?
That I'm not quite sure about, but maybe, I don't know.
Great. And then a question from Kaylee. She wanted to ask, I guess, what was your approach or methodology to developing your metrics?
I wanted to be able to incorporate greenhouse gases give that lens to them as much as I could, and being able to like look at it that way helped guide sort of what areas I was looking at for developing metrics. And then I also worked with my site supervisor to identify some areas outside of greenhouse gas emissions that could be related to sustainability, kind of looking at sustainability more on a broader scale, like across the triple bottom line, looking at social, economic, and environmental impacts within the community.
Great. And then any other questions? If not, I think you can reach out to Emily directly through the email on this slide. And so I think we'll move on to our next fellow. So next up is Serena Pelka, who is serving with City of Del Mar.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I know that myself and the other fellows are excited to share our work, especially in this common field of climate action plan implementation and tracking and such. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about one aspect of my project with the City of Del Mar, which was climate action plan monitoring and reporting. So a little bit of project overview. The City of Del Mar adopted a climate action plan in 2016, and it has 22 different greenhouse gas reduction goals in 4 different policy sectors and 8 social equity strategies. And so in 2019, with funding from the San Diego Association of Governments, the city began a project to update the climate action plan's original implementation plan. And as a fellow, I came on board in fall 2019, and one of the aspects of my project was to support the final stage of developing this updated CAP implementation plan and some of the associated documents and tools that came with it, one of which was a CAP monitoring tool built in Excel to monitor greenhouse gas reductions and to be used as kind of an internal resource. And the other was to develop the first CAP monitoring report, which was one of the components identified in the new implementation plan in kind of a implementation and monitoring schedule. So the CAP monitoring report was identified to be developed every 2 years. And so once we received the most current greenhouse gas inventory from SANDAG at the end of 2019, I started to develop the monitoring report, and it evaluates implementation progress since the adoption of the CAP and kind of summarizes major achievements the city's made to date, overall progress towards the city's 2020 and 2035 reduction targets, and it goes through the performance of each CAP goal. So early in the year, I had developed a CAP annual progress report that kind of focused more on qualitative progress and took a broader look at where the city stood with their CAP implementation. But the intent of the monitoring report is really to go through each goal, look at its implementation status, and see progress made with the greenhouse gas reductions. And so what I did was, where possible and where the data was available, is I used the CAP monitoring tool, which I mentioned was developed to be kind of an internal resource for tracking specific greenhouse gas reductions. And so I share a screen grab here. I apologize as well, it's a little bit small in the poster, but on the bottom right there, you can see a few columns from this Excel tool. And so the intention was for it to have these calculation methodologies built into it. And we input the data and it tells us, so for example, I input the data for 2016 for our waste diversion rate, and it told me that the total greenhouse gas reductions in metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent was 120. And so kind of using these two, using all these resources in tandem together, I was able to utilize the tool, pull any data, a specific greenhouse gas reduction data, and then add it to the CAP monitoring report. So I did run into some challenges with data, just refining it a little bit further, but overall this has really been a pretty robust tool to use, looking at the greenhouse gas inventory and applying it to different methods of CAP reporting. So the CAP monitoring report has a lot of qualitative data, some of the bigger projects we've worked on. It shows a lot of the focus areas that have the greatest potential impact, things like community choice energy, but really it's a balance of qualitative and quantitative data. And so some of the findings from the monitoring report are that overall the city has reached its 2020 emissions reduction target, and it is on track to reach its 2035 target as of now. There's been a 22% reduction from the baseline inventory year in greenhouse gas emissions. But what we did find in the report is that it's significant to note that a lot of the reductions come from climate action on the regional and state level. And so it really showed us what areas does the city need to continue doing local cap implementation, what are some of the trends that we're seeing, what are some of those areas to focus on where we see the greatest potential in Del Mar. And the overall benefits, aside from seeing these trends and all of that, have been that producing these reports and developing out the CAP monitoring report is there just such a critical tool for community engagement. And so having the data available in multiple different ways and having it accessible for the community has been critical for CAP community engagement, and we'll be moving forward. So with the updated climate action plan, implementation plan, with the monitoring tool, and with the monitoring report, these kind of bundled together to create a really good foundation for monitoring and reporting moving forward. So I know that was a brief kind of overview of a lot of different items, but if you have any questions, please let me know, and I'm happy to share with all of you. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Serena. And again, I think if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your questions, or you can send them in through the chat box as well. We have a question from Kaylee, who asks, what are some of those local priority areas that your work uncovered?
Yeah, so some of the local priority areas that the city's been focusing on has been developing a community choice energy program. And so towards the end of 2019, the city was able to join the Clean Energy Alliance Joint Powers Authority. And a lot of the work leading up to that focused on, a lot of the climate action plan work leading up to that focused on the community choice energy program. And the city has also been really prioritizing waste diversion through a lot of different zero waste programming, and with upcoming organic waste diversion legislation, that's been a large focus area and really a priority with high potential for greenhouse gas reductions when you look at each policy sector and the emissions sorting.
Great. And then we have a question from Kif, who asks if you talked about, I guess, any modifications to the tracking process due to COVID.
We haven't gotten quite to that point yet. So the latest inventory that we received at the end of 2019 was from the calendar year 2016, but we have started to talk about how, what that will look like down the road, especially for things like waste diversion, as that was really disrupted, and obviously vehicle miles traveled and all of the transportation data will definitely present some really interesting trends for tracking and reporting emissions when we have that data.
Any other questions? If not, we can move on to our next fellow. But I think thank you again, Serena. And then up next, we have Shivali Gowda with City of Richmond.
Everyone, I'm Shivali and I'm the CivicSpark Fellow with the City of Richmond this year. My main project this year focused on Transparent Richmond, the City of Richmond's open data and performance reporting platform. So I'll give a bit of a project overview, highlight our goals and some metrics, as well as talk about some of our next steps. So the open data platform started in 2016 as a way to share police data as a part of President Obama's police data sharing initiative. And then in late 2016, our climate action plan passed, and we thought a great way to report on our climate action plan would be through this platform. So it's constantly updated and it's accessible to the community. So in 2017, we added our climate action plan to this platform. But in 2019, we decided we wanted to bring this platform to the whole city, not just the environmental and health initiatives department. So we decided to start working on a new platform to include departments like planning, building, community services, code enforcement, and many more. And that was the bulk of what I worked on this year, was updating the climate action plan section of the Transparent Richmond platform, as well as helping bring in those other departments such as planning, building, and street improvements, things like that. And we were able to launch the Transparent Richmond platform on February 18th, 2020. And some of our next steps include doing a larger community engagement strategy to make sure everyone knows about this. So some of our goals with this platform are to increase understanding of city services for the community. We want to make sure that folks have access to city data and that can be useful to their daily lives. For example, we have a capital projects explorer where residents can see the big construction projects happening in the city. They can see the budget and the timeline for those. They can also see up-to-date air monitoring, as you can see on the right of the screen. It has constant live updated air monitoring. In addition, there's information from bike lanes to the average time it takes for a solar permit to be approved. Lots and lots of information relevant to residents. We also are trying to reduce staff reporting requirements to allow city staff to track and meet budget and service goals. So like I said, we want to have more departments working on putting their reports on the platform, like we did with our climate action plan, to reduce that extra burden they have of creating those reports, taking it to council and everything. In addition, we have an open finance platform, which allows both residents and staff to see live updates of the city's spending. So this is really relevant to residents who can see how their money is being spent, and also for staff to see what is running low or what we need to do for different departments. And then in addition, it's also useful to provide transparency and accountability for city staff and services. And lastly, we would like to leverage evidence-based analysis to develop innovative solutions that increase operational efficiency and improve quality of life for our residents. So this basically means we want to take the data and use it to make decisions in the future. For example, when we were working with departments like the building department, they said that their goal is to have solar permits approved within 3 days. So that's a performance metric we put on our platform, and now anyone can go and see if they are actually up to date on that goal. And if they're seeing that they're necessarily not meeting that goal, maybe they could adjust that target, or they could, if they are meeting that goal, then they could, move it to be even shorter just to update their performance. So basically using this data to make informed decisions about how we can serve our residents. So I'll just go through some general metrics of the platform. So we were able to get 11 city departments on board. That includes, like I mentioned, planning, building, community services, a library, code enforcement, economic development, and many more. We have 88 data sets uploaded, and 27 of which are from the Environment and Health Department. Most of those are from the Climate Action Plan. And in addition, we have 152 charts, 103 performance measures, which basically, like I said, allow you to track the progress on a specific goal. For example, this one shown on the screen, the 266, is the number of very low income housing units built in Richmond for the regional housing needs allocation. So we just put the goal that's set by the state, and you can see that we're meeting that goal. And then we have 85 maps as well. And then something that's really important about this platform is to make sure that the data is still relevant and up to date, because it would take a lot of staff time and to keep the data up to date if it wasn't automated. So our main goal is to try to get as much data automated as possible. Right now we have 34% of it automated, which is pretty good, but we're trying to get better. A lot of that data that's automated comes directly from the planning department and the building department, and that data is updated daily in terms of solar permits, projects happening in the city, development projects, things like that. So, and then lastly, we had around 5,700 views for the site the first month it was launched, and we've had around 1,800 views a month since, but because of COVID, we didn't get a chance to fully do as much engagement as we would like to. So that's one of our goals for the next few months, is to really do more community engagement. We have interviewed around 10 community organizations in Richmond to see their opinion on the site and to see how it could help them. And we're hoping to really reach out to more residents in the future and try to make sure that they know about the platform and how it's beneficial to them. And that's pretty much it. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Shivali. And we'll, I think, see if any questions trickle in, which I think we have a question from Jonathan Pruitt, who asks, where do you get the air monitoring from, and how long of a process was it to get the projects and information from the different departments?
Yeah, so for the air monitoring data, Richmond is part of the AB 617 Community Air Monitoring Protection Program. So basically, it was a community selected by BACMA to get extra funding for continued air monitoring efforts, as well as implementing actions to reduce toxic emissions in Richmond, because we have the Chevron power plant and other industrial facilities. So that actually air monitoring data is from that platform that was launched through the AB 617 Air Monitoring Protection Program. So we were able to, we had a contract with Groundwork Richmond, and they had a contract and they created it. We just have it hosted on our platform. And then I think there was another part of the question was what the process was like getting data from other departments. That was definitely difficult, depending on the department, I think, but we kind of, our strategy was to meet with the department, with everyone that was involved, the IT department, the city manager's office, as well as the department that we were trying to get onto the platform, and just ask them what data sets they thought would be useful, and then what data sets would be the easiest to get. For example, there might be some things they want information on, but it's not developed into a data set yet, so that would be hard to get. And then from there, our team either helped them create the page, or they would create the page and then come back to us, and we would have feedback every so often to give them more information. But it kind of went either one of each way. Either we would make the page, ask them for feedback, or they would make the page, ask us for feedback. So, and one thing I didn't mention before was that our platform is different from a lot of other transparent or a lot of other open data platforms, in that we have story pages for each of our departments. So it's not just data sets that you can go through. It's actually like it's like a narrative that you can see how much work we've done in different areas. So that's really helpful, I think, for residents to see.
Great. And I think Kaylee has a question that kind of builds off Jonathan's, which was, which department of the city were you based in? And was there anything that was particularly helpful in collaborating across departments?
So I was in the city manager's office, economic development department, under environment and health initiatives. And something that was really helpful, I guess, we worked really closely with the IT department, and that was good to have cross communication between departments. And I think it was really helpful to have like a staff person dedicated to just Transparent Richmond, which we had in the IT department as well. I think that really helped us push this to be launched in February, because that was a lot of work and effort that she was able to work on with me. So I think that was really important for us to have like someone dedicating full staff time to this project.
Great. And then we have a question from Jilly Corral, who asks, what was your process like to decide which metrics to report for your department?
So for our department, we had a lot of metrics already from the climate action plan that we had already used, but we decided to add a few more things that weren't on there already. For example, we added some information about Cal EnviroScreen, and we added information about air monitoring because of the AB 617 program. And we also added some information about municipal operations and how the city is doing in terms of sustainability. So our main, I guess, the way that we decided was, for our department, it was mostly through the CAP, and then any additional metrics we wanted to add that really showcased the environment and health in Richmond. And we're also working on a in-depth page on our health and all policy strategy to put that all up on the Transparent Richmond website as well, hopefully in the next couple months.
Great. And I think Jonathan mentioned that stuff is happening in Stockton, and I guess if you can maybe share your email to him through that, I think that'd be great.
Will do.
I guess, are there any other questions from folks?
Thank you.
I'm not hearing any. I think we'll move on to the next fellow. But I think thank you so much, Shivali. And up next, I think we have Vanessa Shin with the City of Cupertino.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Vanessa Shin and I am the CivicSpark Climate Fellow with the City of Cupertino Sustainability Division. Thank you so much for the opportunity to contribute to today's conversation. So today I will be discussing one of my major projects in which I leverage utility data to enhance engagement around municipal climate action goals. A major component of my service project was building the city's capacity to visualize and draw insights from electricity, natural gas, and water data associated with city facilities. Specifically, I focused on launching the city's utility data management platform called Lucid Building OS. And this process is depicted in the flowchart on the right of the screen. So before pursuing some of the more fun projects like creating dashboards, I spent most of my time engaging in the equally important, albeit sometimes less exciting, work of setting up the platform and consolidating over 330 utility accounts. So this foundational work entailed developing a procedure for importing data from various utility portals into the single platform. Additionally, I cross-checked bills to update the city's internal records and to ensure data quality across the board. And once our team was confident with the setup of the data, I had the opportunity to build out interactive storyboards and other applications to improve both employee and community engagement around Cupertino's climate action commitments. So as a result of my project, community members now have new avenues for understanding Cupertino's climate action plan. So I partnered with the city's IT department and GIS team to develop an environmental open data platform and to illustrate the data in more accessible and interesting ways. So for example, the water efficient garden storyboard serves as a learning tool for residents to discover the cost savings of drought tolerant landscapes. On the bottom left side of the screen, this dashboard visualizes the dramatic reduction in water consumption of City Hall's landscape before in light blue and after in dark blue, the introduction of drought tolerant plants. Additionally, city staff can utilize the platform's features to inform utility budgets, plan infrastructure upgrades, and predict cost savings from efficiency projects. I partnered with our accounts payable team to streamline the process of paying utility bills, which reduced the staff time for this monthly procedure by over 50%. Additionally, in order to inform the city's budget and enhance resilience during COVID-19, I provided a visualization and estimate of utility savings associated with closing municipal buildings during the pandemic. So the heat map on the right shows a sharp decrease in hourly electricity demand around the middle of March, which is the start of the shelter-in-place restrictions. So next steps for this project include creating facility-specific dashboards and automated reports to help building managers monitor and reduce resource consumption. These storyboards can also inform and engage stakeholders when Cupertino updates its climate action plan in the upcoming year. So to reiterate, the key components of my project were: number one, creating a process for consolidating current and historic utility data; number two, ensuring data quality; and number three, increasing engagement through interactive graphs and other visuals. Although I did have access to a specialized software for this project, I believe that these outcomes can be achieved through many other platforms and tools that your organization might already utilize and that have been already demonstrated through the presentations today. So as I wrap up my service year, as well as this presentation, I'm so grateful for the support of my colleagues in Cupertino and the CivicSpark Network. Thank you again for joining me today, and I look forward to hearing your comments and questions.
Great, thank you so much, Vanessa. And I guess if anyone has any questions, again, feel free to unmute yourself or to ask them in the chat box. Great. I think we have a question come up from Kif, who asked if you can elaborate a little bit more on the building energy COVID example on your slide.
Sure, thanks for that question. Maybe if you could switch to the previous slide. Thank you. So yeah, as a result of some of the foundational work throughout the beginning of the year, I was really excited to have the opportunity to apply that and do so pretty quickly to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. And what I did was I created graphs similar to this heat map here, as well as other dashboards showing electricity, gas, and water consumption compared to the period of the year. So like from March to around July in the last year compared to that period of time this year. And we were able to see a pretty dramatic reduction in both resource consumption, but also cost. And due to that visualization, we're a bit better able to predict moving forward what some of the costs would be to operate our buildings at closed or reduced occupancy.
Sorry, one quick follow-up, and is the thinking to sustain that closed or reduced occupancy and using this as part of the information for that?
Yeah, I think probably in the short term, it's just expecting that that these buildings will be closed and to adjust the budget for that. But I think these dashboards also present an opportunity to see where we could further reduce our energy consumption during these buildings, even when they're not in use.
Right, and I think you have a question from Shivali, who asked, what software vendor did you use?
Yeah, it's called Lucid Building OS, and I'm happy to answer any questions offline if you would like to learn more about that platform.
Great, and then Savannah Gill asks, the virtual garden app I think sounds really interesting and wanted to know if local drought-resistant species are prioritized.
I can't really speak to the landscaping around all of the city's facilities, but this project in particular was to install drought-tolerant plants around City Hall, and the dashboard that this was a part of was integrated in this online app that is kind of like a virtual tour of the garden. I can throw the link in the chat box, but I think the project was really, in addition to saving water and cost on our utilities, was really a public engagement tool to show kind of front and center in this public area how beautiful a drought-tolerant garden can be and what some of the impacts of are in terms of sustainability.
Great. And then Lima asks, how long did it take you to set up the software tool and input all the data?
Yeah, so we had access to the software for a few years before I came on board, and there's a lot of great work that was already put into it, such as setting up buildings and organizing our accounts and meters into these buildings. But where I came in and helped in support with my project was really the final details of ensuring that the data was accurate and that we could be confident in it when we were sharing it. So I would say that that took up probably from the beginning of my service year until March. And then after that was really when I was able to create dashboards and apply the platform.
Thank you. And then let's see if there's any other questions. I think one more from Kaylee, who asked if you have any kind of specialized graphs or charts for any city-owned EV chargers.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. That's actually one of the applications of this platform that is currently in progress. So we're hoping to utilize this platform to better show publicly, how well our city chargers are being utilized, but it can also inform us internally when we're making policies around how much to charge for using the chargers and inform policy that way. So that is one of the outcomes that we're hoping to roll out soon.
Great. Are there any other questions? Not hearing any. I think we'll move on to our next fellow. I think thank you so much, Vanessa. And then up next we have Dominique Dashwood with City of Encinitas.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dominique Dashwood. Thank you for joining us fellows today as we share our successes and stories of the service year. So I was lucky to serve at the City of Encinitas, which is my hometown. And for my presentation today, I'll be focusing on the CAP public outreach and monitoring component of my project. So to provide you with some background, Encinitas is a beach city in North San Diego County. It adopted its first CAP in 2011 and the current CAP in 2018. So the current CAP aims to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 13% and 41% below 2012 levels by 2020 and 2030 respectively, which exceed the state mandated greenhouse gas emissions reductions. So to achieve these ambitious climate mitigation goals, it's important to conduct public outreach to engage residents around reducing emissions on the individual level. So the city currently has one full-time staff member dedicated to CAP implementation. So as a CivicSpark Fellow, that's where I came in to fill the capacity gap and conduct public outreach, reporting, and monitoring. The outreach and engagement work began prior to the CAP's adoption, but significant efforts did not begin until 2018 with the city's first CivicSpark Fellow. And then when I began in September of 2019, I utilized and built upon the resources developed by the previous fellow to conduct outreach in the community. So on the poster here, you can see the list of my project outcomes on the right. I utilized a wide variety of channels, both in-person and virtual, engaging and educational. So examples of some of my project outcomes include a monthly blog feature on the Climate Dashboard website, conducting a community-wide survey on climate and waste issues, and organizing a virtual Earth Day live stream. Bit of a tongue twister, that one. All right, can I see the next slide, please? So the first major endeavor of my project was launching the Climate Dashboard website, and this is an interactive site to demonstrate the city's CAP progress. The dashboard has been very effective as an outreach tool with a structure that can be easily replicated by other agencies. Under each CAP strategy, there are images, graphics, charts, and text content, which give the dashboard a storytelling feel, making it engaging and easy to comprehend for both the public and key stakeholders. Next slide, please. And then closely tied to the Climate Dashboard, the 2019 and 2020 annual reports, as well as the data collection required to produce these documents, were the centerpiece of my CAP project. Relying on the data collected by the previous fellow, I completed the city's first annual report in January. And then in the spring of 2019, I completed the data collection for the next annual report, which is almost ready for publication. And a great feature of the Climate Dashboard is we were able to pull many of the images, the content, and charts and the graphics that were on the dashboard and transfer them over to our annual report, which saved a lot of time on our end. All right, next slide, please. So here you can see a look into the annual report. I try to include graphics and charts whenever possible to communicate the data transparently and consistently. On the bottom, you can see two examples of the charts which demonstrate our performance metrics, which are the key substance of the annual report. So on the left shows municipal energy consumption divided by each city facility, and on the right, the number of trees planted. And all of the charts demonstrate progress from 2012, which was our baseline year, and include target lines for our goal years. So you can see the 2020 and the 2030 targets. And the tree planting for carbon sequestration, we actually have already exceeded our 2030 target. Next slide, please. So from the knowledge gained this year, I wanted to share with you all some of the 4 key takeaways that can be applied to local government outreach efforts, not specifically for CAP, but are definitely effective in this area. And these are to be consistent, determine ideal frequency, present transparent information, and engage the public. So for internal accountability, creating consistent outreach schedules helped prioritize outreach and stay organized. Furthermore, the public can become accustomed to and expect the information provided. So a weekly social media post every week with zero waste tips, the residents can learn to expect that information. Regarding the frequency, it was important to determine how often certain outreach channels or touch points should be utilized. You want to maintain presence as an agency without overwhelming the audience. So for example, social media, I did twice weekly posts, whereas the newsletter only went out once a month, and then an annual timeline is sufficient for significant reports, such as the annual report. And then for transparency, especially in major reporting, as we all know, it's best to report data as completely and accurately, honestly as possible. For the annual report, we presented the progress on CAP implementation using charts and consistent formatting, avoided technical jargon, and honestly reported project statuses even when we weren't able to get as far as we hoped on implementing some of the projects. Then lastly, it was important to create engaging content. For visuals, I used high quality images, bright colors, and graphics. Content, knowing what was important to the public was very effective. I conducted that community survey on climate and waste to gauge what was most important to community members. And then lastly, yeah, the relatable content, attention grabbing, and interesting language were all great ideas. So by using these 4 outreach best practices, the City of Encinitas was able to expand upon and better engage community members. So it's difficult to assess the direct impact of the outreach efforts on greenhouse gas emissions reductions, but it is safe to assume that Encinitas residents and businesses now have a better understanding as they are equipped with the tools and the resources and knowledge to reduce greenhouse gas emissions on an individual level. That concludes my presentation for CAP Public Outreach for the City of Encinitas, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Dominique. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to chat those in our chat box or unmute yourself and ask your question directly to Dominique. I think we got a fun question from Tori Morin, who asked, what was the most enjoyable part of your fellowship?
I would say the most enjoyable part of the fellowship was getting to experience and learn new things that I was not expecting to whatsoever. In the creation of the annual reports, I was able to learn software Adobe InDesign, which is a kind of graphic layout tool that I really enjoyed doing and has been very beneficial in all the outreach work. And it was a completely unexpected component of the project.
And then a question from Kaylee. Were you able to kind of get a sense of traffic to your climate dashboard website? And if so, I guess, did you see any kind of interesting trends?
Yeah, so we recently started collecting the analytics from the traffic to the website. It's interesting to see when you do a social media post, a little peek in how many people are visiting the site or whether it's including it, highlighting it more so in one of the newsletters that will cause a greater increase in the amount of traffic to the site. So it's something we've been recently paying attention to.
Great. And any other questions if folks want to chat in or I think ask Dominique directly? not, I think you could always just reach out to Dominique directly through her email listed here. And I guess we'll move on, I think, to our next fellow. Thank you so much, Dominique. And I think last but not least, we have Justin Saz with City of Piedmont.
Hi, all. My name is Justin Sauce. I'm the fellow with the City of Piedmont for this year. And I'm going to be talking about one of the main projects I worked on, which was helping the city staff develop proposals for local amendments to the California building codes, which we called REACH codes for short, in order to reduce emissions from new and existing buildings in Piedmont. So I'm gonna jump right into it. This is a lot of stuff. I'm gonna go over all the important things, so don't worry about reading every piece of text on this poster. So in your upper right-hand corner, you can see the current 2017 in-territory emissions profile for the city of Piedmont. Our Climate Action Plan 2.0 sets an emissions reduction goal for 2050, which you can see on the right there. As is apparent, we have a lot of work to do to meet the emissions goal for 2050. And one of the main categories of emissions that needs to be reduced are emissions from natural gas appliances in Piedmont's building stock. Now, we're not alone in having this problem. Many jurisdictions do. But Piedmont has an additional problem, which is almost all of our city is completely built out and built out with old, low-rise residential single-family buildings. So we don't expect many of these buildings to be torn down and completely rebuilt from scratch in the near future. And that means in order to reduce emissions from gas in buildings, we need to find ways to help our residents switch out those gas appliances or insulate better at point of remodel. So a number of other jurisdictions have looked at REACH codes or amendments to Title 24, specifically to help facilitate new construction to be all electric. But we were also interested in how can we help existing buildings make this transition over through amendment to the building code. So I was in charge of helping city staff think through this problem. On the lower right, you can see the timeline of work I did around this. Just to give a basic overview, we worked consistently with East Bay Community Energy, the local CCA, with their REACH code consultants and with REACH code consultants with PG&E around formulating particular ideas, which we then presented to residents and to local contractors to get feedback. We incorporated their feedback in formulating a final set of ideas, did another round of outreach, that one virtual because of COVID. And now we've finally formulated our set of REACH code proposals. These proposals are actually going to council tonight, and I'm going to be presenting them. So we'll see how that goes. Our proposals have an emphasis on helping our residents to make this transition in their existing buildings in a way that will also be cost effective. It will present opportunities for residents to have significant cost savings over a 30-year period. So at lower left, I have some of the specific REACH codes that we have formulated that we will be bringing to council. So first is a new low-rise residential buildings must be constructed with all electric appliances. Second, that low-rise residential buildings that are constructing an entirely new upper level or increasing their roof area by at least 30% or more must install solar panels as part of that building job. And third, that when low-rise residential buildings get renovations of $25,000 or more, the renovation must include one item from a list of different energy efficient electrification or insulation options. And renovations of $100,000 or more must include two items from the list. But multiple of the insulation items were specifically designed to be cost effective for homeowners with a payback period and ultimately significant savings on energy costs. So as I said, we're taking these proposals to council tonight. But we also really encourage other jurisdictions to look at these proposals and see if there's anything that they could also take and potentially use in their own struggles to try and reduce emissions from existing buildings. And I guess that's just about everything. I'd like to thank the City of Piedmont for hosting me this year. And I'm open to taking any questions about the project, about my role in the project, etc. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Justin. And if anyone has any questions, again, feel free to unmute yourself or send them through the chat box. I think a question came in from Kif. Not sure, I guess, if he had missed this, but how many renovations each year would meet the second and third triggers annually?
So the second trigger, the numbers we have say perhaps 30 a year, but the third is significantly more than that. It's about 40% of all home renovations in Piedmont, of which there are hundreds a year.
Great. And then a question from Linda Deschambault. Did you consider doing something to require some sort of upgrade at the sales? Sorry about the foot in the background. And also, I think, love that you're doing a PhD in sociology.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I was looking for the right place sort of inside of academia to study these issues. And I think sociology makes sense because it's the study of society and what issue is there that bears more on every aspect of society today than the causes and effects of climate change. With regards to, did we consider doing something to require upgrade at point of sale? I only had a limited amount of space in this little box. One of the things that I couldn't include, another proposal we're bringing to council tonight would be a requirement that homeowners listing a house for sale have to either complete a home energy score or a home energy audit as part of that listing.
Great. And then a question from Andre Duvort. What kind of feedback have you had from the community regarding all electric buildings so far?
That's an interesting question. Most people were relatively favorable on the all electric buildings idea, at least people who attended our public outreach events. Now, it should be said, the City of Piedmont has very few new buildings every year. So all electric construction requirement would not affect many people. People were significantly, when we suggested electrification at point of remodel as a requirement, people were more worried about that, specifically about the cost that they may have to accrue in order to make those switches. So we altered that requirement to include insulation options that they can take instead that will have significant payback.
Great. And then a question from Matt Anderson. Did these proposals go to the Planning Commission or to other city bodies prior to the council?
No, these proposals went straight to council.
Great. And then I think a few questions from Kaylee. Showing, I think, cost effectiveness is a requirement of the state to adopt REACH codes and is tough nut to crack, I think, for many jurisdictions. How did you approach making these calculations? And did the EBCE consultant help with these efforts? I'll pause there and anything.
Yeah, I can talk about this at length. So yeah, initially we worked with EBCE's consultant for REACH codes, TRC. And we had them do several cost effectiveness studies about the cost effectiveness of replacing different, particularly gas furnaces and water heaters with heat pump heating systems. We didn't end up using those cost effectiveness studies though, because again, in public outreach meetings, one of the things that came out was residents preferred that we also give insulation options. So our question came down to, what insulation options at point of renovation would cost effective for residents? So we went to PG&E's cost effectiveness team, Misty Bruseri and Associates, and they did several studies for us, as well as pointing us to previously completed study results that demonstrated the different packages of insulation. For example, one is floor insulation, another is like insulating your water heater while also doing low flow fixtures for your faucets. And several different options of this nature were shown to be cost effective with significant payback over a 30-year period. So we're including all of that as extra material in the staff report. And we're referencing it quite often because we really want residents to understand that this will be good for them in terms of payback, as well as being good for the climate. What is the next question? Any characteristics of Piedmont that could be helpful for other cities? Well, this is what I was getting at. What I hear from other jurisdictions is that they are very concerned about existing buildings and how to sort of try and affect electrification and the reduction of gas emissions from existing buildings. And we really want to encourage other jurisdictions to look at the proposals that we're bringing to council tonight, because we think that many of those same options may be useful for other cities as well.
Great. And then a follow-up question from Matt on the point of sale question. Has the realtor community generally been supportive of this?
To the extent that we've heard from realtors, one way or the other, they have been supportive. I would say the Piedmont market is not primarily driven by small increases or decreases in the cost of housing as much as it is by other factors, such as people wanting to be part of the school district.
Great. And then I guess, were there any other questions? Not, I think we can move out to, I think, the wrap up of our session. I think just want to congratulate all the fellows, I think, for presenting today. And I think thank you so much for our audience for your participation and your support and your encouragement. And this does conclude today's poster symposium session. But I think we would really love to have your continued support for our fellows, and feel free, I think, to reach out to them on LinkedIn or email. We do have all our fellows contacts available on our website, which I think we'll be linking in our chat box. And if you'd like to attend additional poster sessions, we have that information on our website as well, with our next session tomorrow on local adaptation solutions at 1 p.m. Recordings of these sessions will be available on our website, and we'll have it also sent out in a follow-up email sent to you all at the last week of July. And as a reminder, we do have a new interactive tool where you can view the fellows' capstone posters and project placements to better kind of understand their projects and to reach out to them again afterwards. I think, again, thank you so much for attending today's poster symposium. And we hope to kind of see you all more in the upcoming ones we have later on this week. Thank you, everyone. And the links, I think, are in the chat box for kind of graduation and the interactive tool and our fellows pages as well. All right. Hope you all have a great rest of your day.